Great guy, and has agreed to come on to give us an update on a project that he's working on with game cams. Bob actually had a recent and unexpected encounter with a Sasquatch. So Bob, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and one of the things I know we were just talking about when we were off air, and I wanted to bring you on to get your opinion on it, because it was something that kind of hit me. You know, a lot of researchers talk about the wood knocking, and they talk about it as being a form of communication. And I had this guy, Jay, on last week, and he was talking about he was a hunter, he was stuck in this area, in this hunting blind, and he was in the perfect position to view the Sasquatch, and he viewed it for almost 45 minutes. And one of the things he said that I thought was interesting is he's sitting there in his hunting blind, he's looking up, and he thinks he sees what he thought it was a bear, but it wasn't a bear. And the bear stands up. This is right as the sun's coming up, or right before the sun's starting to come up. And he sees this thing get up on two legs, so he puts his binoculars on it. It's obviously not a bear. He said it was somewhere between like a monkey and a person. But one of the things I thought was interesting was he said it picked up a rock and banged it against a tree like 3 times. And then it would stop and it would listen at the tree. And he said it would push the tree over and it would grab like a possum. I don't remember if he said possum or raccoon. I'll have to go back and listen. I think he said possum. But it would grab the possum out of the tree. He said it would smash it up against a tree, bite into the stomach, basically rip it open with its hands, more or less skinning the animal, and then it would sit down and it would eat it. And he sat and watched this thing literally take a rock, bang on a tree 3 or 4 times, stop and put its ear up against a tree to listen, and it was repeated behavior. He sat and watched this thing. And I just wanted to get your opinion on it. I know you've been in this way longer than I have, and I just wanted to see what you thought about something like that.
Well, yeah, it's normal behavior for them to do this. Like I was telling you, the beetles that are in the pine, you can hear them. You don't have to be that close. If you get them stirred up, they will make noise. Or if they're in there eating, they will make noise, and that's what you listen for. And when they are banging against the trees, they're not just out there, to communicate. They're out there to eat. And you can stir up those beetles, those larvae, and they'll push the tree over, and they'll bust open the bowl of the tree and the limbs, and they will take those beetles and larvae out, and they will eat them. And whatever, if you've got little mice in there which do nest up in those trees, they'll eat those, and they will eat possums. They, as you said, they do. They take the head off or crush them, against the tree, and they will bite the stomach open, and they'll get the goodies out, and peel the skin back, and they'll eat it, because big fat possums got a lot of meat on them. You hear a lot about people who, talk about, we went into this area, we heard wood knocks, and then we heard trees, going over and stuff like that. The trees aren't always actually being pushed over because you're there. And the wood knocks aren't always because you're there. They do use knocking sticks, is what I call them, to communicate. But a lot of times they will do it this way because they're eating. I mean, simply put, they're looking for food. And when they put the trees down, it's because they found food up in there. They heard the scurrying in the little holes of some of the little animals that live up in there. We've watched them on thermal do this, and I've watched them, in the evenings before it even got, before it got dark doing this. We've recorded them doing it, breaking the tree limbs out of dead trees and breaking them open. Here they don't often, of course, use rocks. They use their hands to slap the trees. You've heard of people talking about. It sounds like they're slapping on the trees, and this is one of the reasons why is that they're feeding. They're looking for food.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because that actually makes more sense than communicating. I mean, I understand some of it might be communicating, but the feeding and looking for food actually makes way more sense than communication. You know what I mean?
Yes, I understand what you mean, but they do hit the trees in a communication. Like I said, I call it knock sticks. Sometimes you can find several large round pieces of pine that have been broken off, and they are setting up along the side of a tree. They will take them and they will communicate with them.
Yeah, it's interesting, listening to people's behaviors, listening to what they have seen, what they do. It's just, to me, I think for me, I know a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but I think that is some of the best research that you'll find because for me, it just shocked me when he said that. The other thing he said was it was taking a stick. He watched it pick up a stick. And just like you were saying before we went on the air, Bob, using a stick basically was digging out larvae. It was digging out different insects, and it was using it to kind of dig out food after it knocked over this dead tree, and was using it as somewhat like a tool, basically, to use it to eat.
They'll use the sticks to gouge out soft places, and they use their hands and their claws, of course, their fingernails, of course. That's why their fingernails, if you've ever seen their hands up close, they're yellow and brownish and everything because they're dirty. They use them all the time to dig in the ground, to dig in those trees and get the larvae out. They'll use sticks. They'll dig in the ground with sticks. They'll dig in the ground they'll dig into the trees, into the soft spots, like I said, where they're going to get the larvae out, and they'll open it up even more with their hands. And there's a lot more to it than them just going out there and beating on trees for the heck of it.
Yeah, there's always a method to the madness.
Right.
It's interesting. I never thought how ugly their fingernails were, and I'll post some of those pictures up. Thank you for allowing me to post them up, and I'll get them
You're
up.
welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, and I'll get them up on the website this week. But I never realized how ugly their fingernails are. That one game cam you guys have where it looks like a hand. The fingernails are just ugly and yellow and gross and
nasty.
Just nasty looking. But one of the things I want to ask you, Bob, is you had a pretty recent and unexpected encounter. Do you want to talk about that when you were in the truck and Tim and your son was up? Travis was getting the game cams and you were sitting in the truck. Do you want to talk about that encounter?
Sure, I don't mind. It was actually a shock. I really never thought that it would come up to the truck and do that, but I understood the behavior because when Tim and we hadn't been out there for a while, and I don't know if I'm sure not everybody's familiar with Scary Night on the Lone Star Trail. My little story, but this is where Travis and I had walked into several years ago and had it to do with a female squatch. And we go into this area off and on because it's a wonderful area. Let me say, it's got a beautiful cold water spring that comes out of a large hill here and runs across, there's a little bridge over it. It runs down for about 500 yards or so. And it's just a beautiful area. There's meadow here. And there's a very large meadow further down that also holds water. They've got just about everything they want. I mean, you got persimmon trees, you got plum trees, you got grapes, and bukus of game. And this is what you want to look for anyway when you're tracking them, you know. And also, there is a very large ranch that crosses into this area, and they have cattle over there. Well, the ranchers put out, you know, range pellets. And plus there's more water over there. And this is prime for them. This is what they like. Usually there's always something going on in here. We kind of go in there a little bit at a time, you know, and then we might not go in there for a couple of months, and then we go back in, just to give it a break, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And we were in there, Tim and I, we went up to the spring, and the first thing we did, we smelled the stink. And it was definitely a male because it was really smelly. And we turned around and we came back. I had looked at, you know, part of the trail. There's a trail that runs along the side of the stream and then crosses it. And I had discussed with Tim that there had been prints there, but we've had so much rain, and the spring itself had run over and had washed most all of it away. You could just barely make it out, you know, the footprints. And so we went back up, and there's a trail that runs across the trail and into some really, really deep brush that's probably about 12, 14 feet high. And in between that, you've got your pine trees and all. And I told Tim, I said, it looks like something's been, you know, using this trail again because it's gotten really big, you know, really wide. And so we walked over towards it, and we got hit in the face with this horrible smell. And, you know, we knew what it was. So we decided we'd go ahead and put a game cam up, and that's where a lot of those 150-some pictures came from. And it's a big boy. And he's probably about almost 18 inches on his footprints. But when we walked up there to set the camera, well, he was just right in there, and he flew off. We could hear him moving, and you could hear, you know, his feet boom, 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 boom as he was going. But then he stopped and he turned around. We went ahead and put up the game cam, and, you know, Tim mentioned that this is kind of abnormal behavior in a way, because he's let himself be known right then and there, you know, twice. He didn't go far. He didn't just keep going. He stopped to watch what we were doing. Then we went back a couple of days later to put some more cameras out in the thermals. We smelled him again then. And we were on his trail. We saw him. I mean, we didn't see him. We saw the trail. When we went back, my son and I and Travis, my son and Tim went out there. I had already made a long walk, and I kind of just wanted to sit in the truck. And they went out, and I began to catch the scent. And it got stronger and stronger, and then I realized that he was coming up close to me. And what he did was he got within 10, 15 feet of me in the heavy brush there in the trees, and he shook that brush and those trees, and he screamed bloody murder. And when he did, I mean, it shook things in the truck. The cup in the truck was shaking, and
I bet.
I mean, I was shaking, and you could feel it all through my body and everything. And so I pulled my pistol just in case he decided to come out and try to pull me out of that truck. I could see his midsection. I couldn't see him because of the way we were parked. If we'd have been parked a little further up, I could have seen him perfectly. But anyway, I sat there. It scared me. I mean, I don't mind telling anybody, it scared me. We realized later on that what's going on is that, like Tim and I were talking about, and my son, he's got something in there, like young ones and females, whatever, that he doesn't want us to be there. And he would rather us not come in there. That's why he's coming up so close. And he's given us the third degree, basically, you know. And when we went back in there, sure enough, we had some other guys with us. One's a very good tracker. He found some footprints of young ones. And the ones that were messing with the game cam, where I got those pictures, were actually under 5 feet tall.
Really? You think it was a smaller one messing with the game cam?
Yeah, it was young ones that were messing with the game cam.
Yeah,
so he's got a whole family in there. And he's got a good thing right there because he's got the cold water spring, he's got the meadow, he's got the grass, he's got the private land that passes through there where they're feeding their cattle and everything. And they will eat that stuff. And he's got pretty much everything he wants right there, plus his family, and he doesn't want us in there. Very few people go in there, Wes. I mean, this is an area there. Very few people go in there. If they do, they're either crossing to get to the trailhead to go on, or they are crossing to get to the other trailhead that passes the San Jacinto River, because the river bottoms run through there too, but it's a few miles down.
I wanted to ask you, a lot of people have a hard time getting them on game cams. Is there something you would suggest to people out there? Because, you know, I've heard it on both sides. I hear it from some researchers that say it's impossible to get them on game cams. I know you guys have got them on game cams. And then there's more of the, you know, like I went out with Shane Corson and he said, well, you can get them on game cams, but it's like a needle in a haystack. You have to know where to be to really get them on game cams, which makes more sense than it's impossible to get them on game cams. You know what I mean? But is there something that you would suggest to people as far as people trying to get them on game cams?
Well, it is like a needle in a haystack. I mean, I admit that. You really have to know where they are before you can put your game cams out. If you're going into a new area that you haven't researched before, you need to look at the lay of the land. You need to look at the food that's in that area, as well as not just game, but natural foods too. You know, tubers and grass and fruits and berries and, you know, things of that sort. And the water source is most important also. And that's when you can go in and you find an area like this, like that area, and you go in there and you look for signs. I know that people, you know, say that these creatures leave very little, you know, for you to find and everything, but really and truly, they leave a lot. And if you know what you're looking for, you can find the impressions. You can find where they lay down. Their bedding where they lay down will stink like them for a good long time, especially, you know, if you got a big male out there. This is what you have to look for before you put your game cams out. And then once you find an area that is very likely you're getting good sign in, you want to paint it black. And the smaller the better. And if you can find a small one that does audio as well as the video, you don't want to put it on picture really. You want to put it on the video. The video captures better, and you have less halo if you're close. And I think if you put those pictures out, people will see what I'm talking about. It looks kind of like a blue halo a little bit because they're so close, and the shutter speed is a certain 1/6 of a second. I'm not real good with the technical stuff. Tim is.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. Like when it snaps a picture, I know, and Tim and I were talking about it. I think you were with us on that call, and it's almost like the picture wasn't snapping quick enough to capture it by the time it got on top of the camera.
And see, also, you know, the one where it's moving away, it's moving very quickly, and the camera's just not fast enough to pop that out real good. And so, you get a little bit of halo. If you put it on video, you paint them black, use a black strap, because they don't see black real well, especially at night. You may just very well get you some photos. But however, you need to have something there that will hold their attention. In other words, if you got some young ones in there, it's probably the young ones that are probably going to mess with the game cam. If you got a little red laser light on it, or whatever, a little light on it like we got on ours, that holds their attention. You can put out some peanut butter jar with a spoon in it if you want to. You just don't want to keep doing that because they'll expect you to give them, this peanut butter. And for me, that turns kind of a bad situation when you're not putting it out. It's kind of like feeding them, and it's like feeding a bear. We've done this before, but I stopped doing that. I suggest it's a good idea to do it. Give them something there that will hold their attention, but you don't want to do it a whole lot because we have actually been knocked down and the pouch that had the peanut butter in it stolen from us. And you don't want that because when one of those knock you down, you've been knocked down.
It's interesting that you talk about holding their attention. I was talking to Tim about this, and I don't know if you guys have tried it out there yet or not. You may have tried this in the past, Bob, but one of the things that they do when they're trying to see if chimps or gorillas are in an area down in like Africa or anything, they'll actually hang balloons in the tree. And the balloons in the tree, it's something unnatural, but it flows with the wind and it captures the attention of any primate. Primate's going to go up and check it out, maybe play with it. And I don't know if you guys have tried that down there in Texas or not. It might be worth trying.
Well, one of the things that I have done, since it's not food, is I've put up red and yellow chem lights. And I will go out there and I'll put them up in the evening. And, they last a long time. And that seems to, if there's any in the area, that seems to hold their attention pretty well, especially the red or the yellow. Balloons, no, I haven't done that. I have done it with Jell-O and with mixing Jell-O and Hog Wild together. Hog Wild is a mineral-based feed that you can bring in hogs with for hog hunters. We use it all the time when we're hunting hogs. It can be smelled for a mile or more in the woods, and that seems to be very popular as well. Yeah. As far as holding their attention. And then again, you want to be careful where you're at. Private land, it's pretty good, but in the national forest where we work a lot, it can be considered baiting hogs.
Yeah, no, and I guess it's something most people, out looking for Sasquatch don't stop to think about. You can get busted for baiting animals when you're trying to bait a Sasquatch.
Oh yeah, and they don't listen to you. Well, I'm trying to get a Sasquatch to stop before the game cam, and no, you're getting a ticket.
Yeah. Yeah, I can.
They don't pull any punches for us, believe me.
Yeah, no, I bet, especially out there in Texas.
I know I kind of went off a little bit, but there's so much information. We've tried so many things, and what we have found the best is to try to hold their attention with something that's non-food. Peanut butter, I don't mind putting out, but try non-foods. Like the balloon sounded very interesting to me. That's something I hadn't thought of. And I'm going to try it too, to be honest with you. I'm glad you brought it up. Light, anything that reflects, you can put up a small mirror if you want to. uh, show them how ugly they are.
Yeah.
But you really, really, really want to paint your game cam black and use a black strap. I know it's easy to see in the daytime. It's really not as hard. It's really not as easy to see as you think. But black, they don't see that well. And if they see that little light on your game cam, they're going to mess with it. You know, they're going to look and see what's on the side of that tree. You know, why is that little light there? And that's how we get the photographs, but and the videos. But you really, Wes, you really have got to find the spot first. There's places out there that you know there's just no food in the up in these pine barrens, and you know the deer move through. They might come in there and bed down or whatever. Well, you know they're not going to. They're just not going to stay in these areas unless they're moving through. You know, you got to find the water, you got to find the food sources, and you got to basically you got to put your mind or yourself in their shoes. Okay? You know, they pretty much eat everything that we do, pretty much eat everything a bear does. Okay, what is a bear? Where does a bear want to live? Where does a deer want to live? You know, what do they look for? You put yourself in their place. And then you can start answering those questions. What do you want? Where do you want to live? Do you want to drink swamp water? Do you want to drink this nice, fresh, cold water coming out of the ground? You know?
Well, going back to the balloon thing first,
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. That's how they capture them on game cams in like Africa and everything because of the balloons. Any primates drawn towards this weird thing flowing in the wind and the trees, you know. And it's
Right.
funny that you mentioned the bright colors too, because that's one of the things a lot of big game hunters will talk about is using bright colors, especially when you're trying to capture a gorilla or a chimp or something on your game cam. You want to use this bright color with a balloon because it'll capture their attention.
Right.
But yeah, no,
Right.
it's interesting. You talk about the areas. Shane Corson and I went out to this lady's property that she's had some activity on, and it's got a long, long history of activity. And as we were walking around the property, I was telling Shane the same thing. Man, if I was a Sasquatch, this is where I'd want to be. It's cool under the tree cover. There's plenty of cover. There's deer. In fact, we saw several deer when we were up through there. There's wild fruit growing everywhere, wild berries, peach trees, apple trees. And we started finding, I used some of the stuff you showed me, Bob, as we were kind of walking through the area. Shane and I would stop and I'd say, hey, look, here's an impression. And nothing good enough to cast as far as a footprint, right. But it was definitely a left foot where it stepped down into the dirt. But we'd see a lot of those impressions throughout the track. You could see almost where they were traveling. Even Shane and I were kind of made the mistake of taking the hard path of walking around this trail or walking around this property. And I told Shane, I don't think they're going the hard way, man. I think they're using, instead of north to south, I think they're moving east to west because it's an easier travel place. And as we walked the property, we started finding impressions left and right of exactly the easiest path through there. And then we found what we thought was a bedding area. It was way too big to be an elk that had bedded down there, but something had definitely laid, and it was up on a ridgetop overlooking everything. And it was just a perfect spot because you could hear anything coming 360 degrees from you, and you have plenty of escape routes. I mean, it was just a perfect area. I mean, we even saw a place to where something was sitting down eating clamshells and discarding the shells. And it's not even the inlet to the ocean was pretty far away. So whatever had grabbed a bunch of clamshells had brought it back to that area, had sat down, started eating clamshells, and basically was discarding these shells right by the property. And this lady just had a sighting 2 days ago, right on top of her property. So it was, you're right. I mean, once you find an area, you find the impressions, is food, water, and cover there. It's not as hard to find these things as most people think.
No, it's not. It really isn't. You just have to know the land and talk to some of the people, and maps will show you a lot of what's there. And they've got really good satellite maps now, on Google, on Google Maps and things like that, where, you can just pull it up and you can get really close and, oh, look at this, here's some water, here's some water. Let's go out there and check that out. And, so you go out there and you got your GPS and you map the area. And I used to do it the old way, where I just, I didn't bring my GPS. I used my compass and a map. The guys nowadays, they got their GPS. They can map it as they're walking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like it probably would pay y'all to put up some audio and some game cams out there. The game cams do work, Wes. It's just that I guess you just have to fine tune where you put them. And even then, it's not a guarantee. It's like a 50-50, You put them up, they might go around them. Who knows? I mean, and their behavior, you'll notice on the pictures that I sent you, the way they hold their hand and hit the game cam is very primate.
Yeah, it is.
Did you notice that?
I did. Yeah, I told Tim it reminded me of a gorilla, like a gorilla's hand.
Yes, that's the way it always is. They will use the palm of their hand. They'll use their fingers, but when they're hitting and exploring something, like that, they tend to do it very much like a gorilla.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw those pictures. It looked like a gorilla with some really bad fungus on its fingernails,
Well, just think of where those fingers and fingernails have been, in the bellies of animals and in the ground, and pulling out bugs and everything, breaking open trees.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty gross. It was pretty gross. With this project Overwatch that you guys are doing, what are you guys kind of hoping to accomplish with that? I know you guys are setting up game cams and having some success, but what are you hoping to walk away with after all of the pictures are set up, all the game cams are set up?
I'm hoping to walk away with a really good video. And we do have some out there that do video and sound. And I'm hoping that we will have some very good sound and videos.
Are those?
We've gotten them in the past, and that is my main goal for the guys. I've gotten them before, but the guys, they're very excited, and I'm hoping that that's what we get for them. We're going to do it for the rest of the year.
Yeah, are you guys going to release those to the public, or are you guys just keeping them private for now, or is it kind of undecided?
Well, in a way, it's kind of undecided. I know that some of the guys are very excited and they want to release them and everything. I guess I'm kind of holding back a little bit. I want everything that we release to be copywritten now, because I have lost so much, and I don't want it to happen to them, and I don't want it to happen to me again. Everything that's going to be released, we will release, a little bit at a time, and we will be copywriting these first, though.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for that. Especially with the way the Bigfoot community is. I even need to use the term community. People are so quick to jump on something, especially when you spend the time and effort to get something to present it. So I understand you wanted to release it the right way.
That's the other thing, Wes, is that, these, a lot of the people, on a whole, the majority are good people, and they want to see, what is evidence is being gotten and everything. But it just upsets me to no end to watch these guys go out there working butts off in this 108-degree heat, going into these swamps, walking over 5-foot snakes, and we have the POV to prove it. The bull gators in some of the swamps. These guys are sweating. They're bleeding. They are. Hogs are screaming at them. This last time we went out, we had hogs screaming at us, and they were not wanting to play. We were very cautious. We set up a small perimeter to watch as we did our work. Some of us watched our backs because they can come out of anywhere, and they're fast, and they will cut you. I've been cut, and I've had to down some, but they're so fast that you're just not going to get them all when you got 5 or 6 of them coming at you, no matter what the size are. And it irks me so bad for these guys to go through all this stuff to get what little bit we get, and to have some jackass, pardon me.
No, you're good.
Want to throw it under the bus, want to set it on fire, want to say, oh, this isn't real, this isn't that, this isn't that. My God, they are not doing, they're not hurting. They're sitting in front of their damn computer. I'm sorry.
No apologies. I mean, and you're right.
These guys are working their butts off to get what they get. And I mean, it's not a, we go out there and, we're going to get it, every time we go out there. We go out there, we've got several game cams out there, and honestly, only 2 game cams got anything.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hiking, and it's a lot of hot weather. It's a lot of mosquitoes, a lot of poisonous snakes that we, damn near walk on. I just think that they deserve so much more better than to have people, set it on fire. Oh, this isn't real. Oh, this is a fake. Oh, this is hoaxed, or oh, this is that, and everything else.
Yeah.
And it just upsets me to watch these guys dragging in and drinking their water and putting their towels on with water on them to get their body temperature back down. And honestly, like Travis, he's gotten so hot, he's lost his cookies, and stuff like that. These guys are hurting. They're out there doing what they love to do, but, they're out there hurting, and in a way, they're kind of hurting for the community because they're bringing useful research in that other people could use. They're getting results, and I just hate to throw them out there because I just know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm kind of glad you said all that, Bob, because a lot of people will say, well, I get the brunt of it, but a lot of people, I'll have guests on the show that say, hey, I have this picture, I have that picture, would you mind looking at it? I don't want it made public. And I don't think the bulk of the audience, like you said, most of them are really, really good people. I don't think they really understand how much of a beating you take whenever you release something. And it's always from the guy, behind his computer that out in the forest couldn't get from point A to point B without sitting down to take a breather. That's giving you his feedback on anything that you present. I don't think people really understand the frustration of that. And so I kind of understand why a lot of people don't want to come forward with pictures. I had a really good game cam. I got to go back and look it up. I had it in my email, but it was a Sasquatch running away from the game cam. It looked like it was running away from the game cam. And if you took the Patterson film and the Patterson Gimlin film and took Patty and basically put her in a full sprint away from this game cam, that's what it looked like. And it wasn't that far away, but it wasn't from a Bigfoot researcher. It was from a hunter that got it. And he told me specifically, don't make it public, but look at this and tell me what you think. And I'm thinking, Jesus, man, this is one of the best game cam pics I've ever seen. I mean, clear as day, you could see the butt, you could see the thighs, you could see the calf muscles, you could see the back muscles, you could see its arms. As it was running, it had a cone-shaped head, and it was taken out in Kentucky. It was basically running away from the game cam. It just kills me because I have it in my possession, but out of but out of respect, I won't put it out because he asked me not to. But it was one of the best game cam pictures I have ever seen. You know, a lot of these people that have something negative to say would keep their mouth shut. A lot more would come out. A lot more people would come forward and share. You know, it's hard enough to come forward and share an encounter without being attacked by people that say, well, you're a liar, or you made that up, and now when you have evidence, it's twice as bad because people say, well, you faked that, or that's a hoax, or that's a man in a monkey suit, or that's this, or that's that. And they don't really understand, just like this hunter, this guy knows nothing about Bigfoot. He was just like, hey, what is this thing, man? He's like, is this what you guys call Bigfoot? And I'm thinking, Jesus, I wish I could put this up on my website because this is honestly one of the best game cam pictures I have ever seen, hands down. More clear than the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, see, that's where a lot of the good evidence comes from, Wes, is by accident, by hunters, people who are out there, but they don't want to put it out there because they don't want to be made a mockery out of, you know. And that's where the best evidence comes from, is by accident. I mean, basically, when we get something on our game cams, to me, it's by accident. It's because the young ones wanted to play with it. It's because they went past and didn't know we had been in there. It had been long enough, our scent was gone. It had rained enough. That's how it happens. You just don't go out there and get it. You go out there and you get it by accident.
Yeah, just like most encounters happen by accident.
Right. And it's true. I mean, you can go in that area and, man, there might be 50 Bigfoot in there, you know, or Sasquatch monsters in there. There could be 50 of them in there. That doesn't mean you're going to get one picture on your cam. And it's true.
No, it is, yeah.
What you get by accident. That's how it works. But when you get it, I mean, it's fantastic. It gives you butterflies in your stomach. And you want to share, but you only share with your friends because you've been burned. And, like, you know, we share with you. And, you know, we let you put, you know, some of our stuff out because I know that you're protecting it and everything. And it's not going to go everywhere.
Yeah, and it's a shame it has to be like that. You know what I mean?
It's true, but that's the way it is. When I first started in the, I didn't mean to get off on this, but when I first started in the Sasquatch community, you know, I've never had a computer before, and I haven't been out there really that long. I thought that what I was doing was sharing evidence. Research evidence with other like-minded people. I didn't realize that there were so many people that weren't like-minded out there and couldn't care less about your evidence or what you knew or anything of that sort. They just want to make trouble. And that's kind of the way I have viewed the community outside of, you know, a few individuals out there. But on a whole, like I said, you know, people mean well, and I've got a lot of good friends out there, you know, don't think I don't. But it's just really, we've gotten so gun shy, I guess you might say, to put anything out now.
Yeah.
It's just going to come out slowly when it does, and it's going to be copywritten, and you'll probably put it out for us.
Well, I appreciate it.
You're officially and unofficially our put-out guy.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys sharing with me and trusting with me to let it out. And, I love all you guys down there like family, man. When I was down there, it's just, I can't say enough about you guys. I was treated like family when I was down there, and I felt like I was just hanging out with family when I was down there. So I appreciate it from you guys. And
Well, my wife just loved y'all to death, and especially the girls and everything. Shannon and Mimi were so good to me, and I appreciate it because I was sick at that time, and they took good care of me.
yeah, no, I know. I'd love to have you on for more updates, Bob, and especially when I get some of these encounters on that just kind of blow my mind. It seems ridiculous, like the guy saying he saw it hit it with a rock on the tree, but it kind of blew my mind when he said that. Sometimes the simplest answer is really the one that makes the most sense.
Well, a lot of times it is just the basic, easy answer is what's going on, and it's just that they're hungry, and that's what they want to do. That's where they find their food. I mean, look at it. If we were out there and we were living in their shoes, we'd be doing the same thing. We would have learned the same thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, Bob, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Wes. I'm sorry I got off on my tangent, but it was really fun, and I really love talking to you all the time.
I appreciate it. No, some of that stuff needs to be said from time to time. And so it's good to say it from time to time because, there's a lot of new people that come on. I know I have new listeners that come on all the time. And one of the biggest frustrations I get from people, in fact, I got a message from a guy the other day. I'll have to look up to see what his name was, but I just got a message from a guy and he said, it's so frustrating to listen to your show and hear all of these great researchers come on, or you hear witnesses come on that say they have pictures and say they have this or say they have that, but they are unwilling to release them. And I don't think a lot of people realize it's not the person who's really unwilling to release them. Go take a look at some of the Facebook groups in the Bigfoot community. Go take a look at some of these so-called researchers with their egos. And then you start kind of getting a clear picture on why people really don't want to release anything. Why they just kind of keep it for themselves, and
Right.
It just makes more sense,
Well, Wes, it's not a competition, and it shouldn't be treated as a competition. We should be putting this out. We should be showing what we're getting and how but not just what we're getting. We should be telling how we're getting it, and that's the most important thing, is how you're getting the photos, how you're getting the pictures. And I tried to go over some of that with you earlier. It's not a competition. We should all be together on this, and I'm hoping that the community comes together one day. I'm pretty sure it will.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't hold your breath. I don't think it's so much. I don't think
I'm trying to be optimistic here, Wes.
Well, the problem is it's not so much it's a competition, it's egos. Egos get in the way, and it's like I've always said in the past, we're not curing cancer here, so I don't understand the ego from a lot of these people that either have their own Bigfoot shows or are researchers or are whatever they want to call themselves. It's ego. It comes down to this weird ego, and I just don't get it. It's kind of like, well, I guess you would say competition. It's competition and ego, but it's so ridiculous when you step back from everything and you look at it. It just seems so ridiculous that there's ego and there's competition and there's, you know what I mean? It's just, it's ridiculous.
I know. It breaks my heart to think that, a lot that is like this out there, but like I said, on the whole, not everybody is that way, and people do want to listen and try what other people have used and have gotten evidence with. And I don't mind sharing that at all with anybody, what works for me, what works for my guys out there, It's just a lot of hard work. It's just a lot more hard work than what people think. And, it's not going to a campground and just, staying in that campground. Well, you know how it was, how we did it, we got out there and we got out there at night, we got out there in the daytime, we got eaten up by mosquitoes.
Yeah, it's way harder than most people realize. Even to get good sounds, it's harder than most people realize.
That's true. It is. It's a lot of hard work. Researching Sasquatch can be dangerous at times, can be rewarding, and can be kind of heartbreaking too. Just depending on what you find out there, and depending the weather. Like right now it's so hot, and I'm going to tell people you want to be in good shape to do this.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
That's why old Bob's got one good walk in him nowadays, and then the rest of the time it's sitting in the truck cooling off.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to get back down there and go back out with you, Bob, and all the guys down there. And Mo took good care of us while we were down there. Tim came out. All you guys are good guys. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing everything. And I'd love to have you back on for another update, or even talk about some of these encounters that I'm getting.
That would be fine with me, and thank you, Wes. My wife says tell you hello. She's going to shoot me if I don't tell you that.
Well, tell her I said hello.
Okay. And thank you very much for having me, Wes. I appreciate it.
Next on the show, I want to welcome Patty. Patty had the Dogman encounter that I spoke about in the beginning of the show. Patty, thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing here on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
This encounter actually happened several years back when you were a child. And do you want to talk about what part of the country, first of all, was this in?
This is in eastern Ohio, a small town called Lisbon. The experience I had was either shortly before or after Christmas. I don't remember. I just remember it was roughly Christmas time. And it would have been the winter of '69 going into 1970.
And if you would, tell us what you're doing and tell us what you saw. Just kind of walk us right into the encounter.
Okay. Well, we lived, where our house was, behind our house was a rail bed. One night I was 6 years old, and I woke up one night during the night and went to my bedroom window to look out into the backyard. My bedroom window faced the backyard of the property, and my bedroom window was up on the second floor, so I had a good view out and down, unobstructed, clear view. And it was a very, very brightly moonlit night. I don't know the phase of the moon. I just know it was very bright. There were a lot of stars, and it had snowed. So there was a thick layer of fresh, bright white snow that was reflecting quite a bit of the moonlight. And I was standing looking out my bedroom window toward the back of our yard. And at the back, there was a large berm that went up to act as a barrier between the railroad track and our yard. And up against that berm, we had a rabbit hutch. And we had a large pet rabbit that was probably a 12 or 15-pound rabbit. Well, as I was standing looking out the window, I had stood for not long. It couldn't have been any more than 30 seconds, maybe a minute. I saw something coming up over the top of that berm as if it had been on the side where the railroad track was and was ascending the berm. And at first I saw its head appear, and then its shoulders, torso, and then its upper legs, and then the rest of it as it came over the top of the berm and began to descend on our yard side of the berm. And what I saw was a very tall, probably between 6 and 6.5 feet is what I would estimate now. and it looked for all the world like a very large, black, hairy, upright walking dog. The only difference I couldn't see its feet because the snow on the ground was probably, I would estimate, 6 inches deep maybe, so I wasn't able to see its feet. But as it was coming down the berm and walking through the snow, it was leaving quite a trail behind it. Its legs it seemed a little stiff, but not, it wasn't walking really fluidly. It seemed a little stiff. And it had its arms out, well, arms or front legs, whatever you would want to call it, not out in front of it, but not completely to the side, about halfway in between, as if it was balancing itself as it was coming down this berm. As I was standing there watching it, in my child's mind, I was thinking, well, this isn't a man. And as I watched it, it came down the berm and it turned toward its left and walked probably another 8 to 10 feet to where the rabbit hutch was. And it bent over and began trying to manipulate the latch, I guess it would be, on the rabbit hutch door, as if it was trying to open the door. And it kind of fiddled with the latch for several seconds, and then it opened the door, and it reached inside, and I did not see it grab my rabbit because, being a 6-year-old child at that point, I knew it was going to, get my rabbit and harm my rabbit. So at that point, I slapped the window with my hand and screamed no, and jumped back in my bed and pulled the blanket up over my head. So that's the gist of the story. That's, as I told you when we spoke earlier, it was a very brief, very short experience that I had.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience, though. It's not, during that time frame, the Patterson-Gimlin film was just coming out, and people were starting to talk about Sasquatch, but it wasn't really well known at that point. What's interesting, though, is your description is something completely different. And there's little oddities in your story. There's little details. I know even being a child, but even today, there's little details that you mention that I can pick up on. When I was talking to the hunter, I don't remember what episode it was now, where he saw the one, it actually was walking on all fours, and then it stood up. And one of the things that he said was kind of weird was its arms were kind of in front of it, but it kind of wasn't. And him and I talked about it off the air, and he even made the comment to me. He goes, I think they use whatever that thing is. He goes, I don't think it's a Sasquatch, but whatever that thing is, whatever you guys want to call it, it seemed like it was trying to balance itself with its arms. He goes, just the arm placement was really strange. Can you describe the head from what you remember? Can you kind of describe what the head looked like?
It looked like a large dog. It had a long dog-like snout, not as long as like, a collie dog or something like that, but a fairly long snout. And it had its ears at the time I saw it were not erect, but it looked as if they were folded back on its head, as when a dog will fold its ears back. It was black. Its fur was black. So I was seeing it from a distance of about 50 feet. The way our house was situated, the piece of land we lived on was wedge-shaped, and it's hard to describe, but where our house was located was actually fairly close to the back property line, so I was only about 50 feet away. I couldn't discern any eyes, but I could discern a nose that was on the snout. It wasn't I wouldn't say it was as big as like a German Shepherd or a coyote nose. It was a little, the nose part, the actual nose seemed a little smaller. But the fur was black, couldn't discern any eyes to speak of. The fur on the back of its head and its neck down to its shoulders seemed a little longer than the rest of the fur on its body, almost as if it was wearing like a fur cape or something. Its shoulders were not quite in the orientation that human shoulders are, being in line with the side of the body. They appeared to me at that time as if they were just slightly forward. And again, I don't know if it was because of the way the animal, the thing, was walking, or if that's what its physiology was.
Did you ever see the creature drop down to all fours?
I did not. And as a matter of fact, when you and I had discussed this the other day, it appeared to be, as it was ascending up the back side of this berm, it had to have been coming up upright. Because if it had been coming up on all fours, I wouldn't have seen its head first and then its shoulders. Then it's hard to describe it. I know it wasn't ascending the back side of the berm on all fours. It was coming up the berm, walking up the berm the way a person would, and it came down the front of the berm the way a person would.
So what happened next? Did you talk to your parents and tell them what you saw?
Well, at the time, my father was a policeman, and he was very no-nonsense and very, he was rather intolerant of stories and make-believe and things like that. So I knew I couldn't even say anything to him about it. I did tell my mother, and she kind of condescended to me a little and said, well, you know it was just a dog that got your rabbit. And I did try to tell my grandfather. They lived down the street from us, about 2 blocks down on the same side of the street. And he told me that was, quote, the wolf man. So, that's the only reply I ever got out of him, was it was the wolf man. And being 6 years old, I had no idea what a wolf man was,
That's kind of interesting that your grandfather would make that comment.
One thing I wanted to back up and mention in my description of it, I had mentioned its arms. Its hands I could see that as they were working the latch. So I could see that it had its arms kind of extended, that it did not have paws the way a dog would have paws. It had fingers. I mean, I could clearly see it had fingers, and they weren't extremely long, but it did have definite fingers as opposed to the paws of a dog. And something else I neglected to mention was, after I saw this, the next morning at breakfast, my mother was cooking breakfast, and me and my brothers were sitting at the table. And my father had come in from outside, and he came onto the back porch and was stomping the snow off his boots. He opened the door, came inside, stomped his boots some more, and he looked at my mother and told her, I buried it. And my mother looked at me, I guess, to gauge my reaction. Because by then I had told her about what I had seen during the night, and she said, well, it was just a dog that killed your rabbit. So, there was something out there that my father did have to dispose of. What it was, I didn't see.
Do you have a suspicion that your parents probably knew a little bit more, or maybe had seen it themselves? Or do you think they were completely oblivious to what was going on?
My father was a policeman in that town for several years. He had at least one relative who was a policeman, and of course they all did the fireman, ambulance driver, multitasking type thing. And they also would hunt raccoons in the hills around this little town. This little town sat in a rather narrow valley. And one of the hills, we lived on the southwest side of the town, on the last street on the southwest side of town. And the hill that was closest to our house was probably no more than half a mile, probably not much more than a quarter mile, because you could walk from our house and be down at the foot of that hill in just a matter of minutes. Even as children, we would ride sleds down there. They used to hunt raccoons, my grandfather and his brothers, and then my father and his brothers would hunt raccoons up in these hills. And there were caves in the hills. We moved before I was old enough to go, to actually go up in the hills and see the caves. My mother and father, I have thought about that, and I wouldn't even be able to speculate if they had seen anything. My father being a policeman and a fireman and all these other things, he certainly would have had opportunity to see all sorts of things. My mother was a housewife. She was home all the time. So, again, I don't know. But my grandfather, he kind of liked to tease us kids with stories, scary stories. But then again, like you say, I wonder myself if he had ever seen anything out of the ordinary. And even when I was describing to him, he said, well, that's the wolf man. As if, well, yeah, that's the wolf man. So I'm not really, I couldn't speculate if they actually saw anything. Of the three of them, maybe my grandfather would have seen something.
The normal reaction to when someone tells you something like that is to go, you saw what? But for him to come right out and say, hey, you saw a wolfman. It's kind of like when, I talked to a lot of people, and it's amazing the people who really aren't into this topic, they'll just start describing what they saw, and then they'll ask me, and I'll go, well, it sounds like you saw a Sasquatch. It's almost like they're in shock, just because I don't know if it's because I'm not so nonchalant about it,
Right.
But it kind of sounds like maybe your grandfather. A lot of those old timers, they don't really. It's hard to get too much out of them, especially when they see weird stuff.
Exactly. Because he was elder in his church, and he'd had a pretty good job as a master draftsman for years at a small local company. He was kind of an upstanding, member of the community. So if he did see something, he wouldn't have blabbed it all over. But at the same time, like you say, his reply was sort of nonchalant. Oh, that's the wolf man.
Yeah.
And as far as being called a dog man, I wasn't even aware of that there was a phenomena of people seeing these things that they were calling a dog man until about a year ago. We were watching some YouTube videos, my husband and I, and somebody said something about a dog man, and of course, we started watching. I said, hey, that looks like what I saw when I was 6. So I wasn't even aware of a phenomena called the dog man.
Yeah, and most people aren't. Most people, they're kind of, I think a lot of times when people see something like what you saw, they're less apt to talk about it because it's so far out of the normal Sasquatch type creature. They're less apt to talk about it, but people do see them, believe it or not. People do see them, and they describe them the way you described them. In the area that you're in, there's definitely reports out of that area of the Dogman. I wish we'd come up with I like Wolfman better than Dogman as far as what we call it, but,
right. Because this was far more dog than man. I mean, this was it wasn't like mostly man but part dog. This was, what I saw would have been mostly dog with, the only, quote, man-type features would have been an upright walk, and having fingers, and its nose being, the nose on the end of its snout being a little bit smaller than a regular canine-type nose.
Yeah, and the other thing interesting about your story is, like your mom saying, well, a dog got it. Well, how's a dog get into that pen? A lot of those rabbit pens, you need hands to open them.
Oh, this had an actual latch on it, a brass, not a hasp, but it's an actual, it was an old latch from a barn is what it was. I don't know how to describe it. But it's not something that even a raccoon a raccoon may be able to operate it, but, just a generic dog is not going to be able to paw it open, the type of latch it was. Yeah, and it seemed like it fumbled with it for a minute. It was oriented toward me in like 3/4 profile as I was watching it fumbling at the door of the rabbit hutch, but it opened it, and it reached inside and got my rabbit.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what your dad buried. If maybe it popped its head off, or he caught, just saw pieces of it, or it'd be nice to go back and talk with him and see what he saw, you know what I mean?
He has, early onset Alzheimer's, so I don't know that that's a possibility to ask him what he saw. And I don't know that my mother ever saw it. I certainly didn't see it. The only thing I saw was a couple of days later there was some, my brother told me it was blood on the snow. And it was, of course, it wasn't red after a few days. It had turned brown. And it was probably 8 or 10 feet from the hutch, back in the direction that the thing had come down over the hill. I don't know where he buried it. I don't think he would be able to give me an answer right now.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Well, I appreciate coming on, Patty. I know it's not the greatest childhood memory.
And again, as you and I discussed earlier, it's a memory I've had since I was a child. So I believe it's a genuine memory and the memory never alters. I don't, suddenly remember extra things about it, or I don't forget things about it and remember them later. It's always, I guess because it was such a short and intense memory, it never changes. I've had the memory my entire life. I'm 50 now. So this happened when I was 6, so that's 42 years, and it's always been the exact same memory and the same sequence, the same images, everything has been the same. It's never altered. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing it. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed listening. Hope you're able to take away something. Until next time, everyone.